These are my psychic predictions for 2022 for Australia. Hi again, if you're new to the channel, welcome, and don't forget to follow me because there's lots of videos on this channel about predictions for the future, particularly at this time of year as we're coming up towards the new year. I'm making these predictions on the 16th of December 2021 for 2022 for Australia. There'll be a separate video also for New Zealand, although that will be touched upon briefly in some of the things I have to say now. Okay, so Australia, I feel, as many of you that follow me know, that I have a lot of fears about China. I don't think they're unfounded fears. China, since China's opened up to the world, it's become a bit like a Pandora's box for the world, in my opinion. And we've had all sorts coming out. We've had coronavirus come out of China, and lots of thoughts I've said on this channel already about the thoughts that maybe coronavirus was something that came out of a lab there. Things we were talking right back in the beginning of the pandemic, however long ago that was now. But Australia is a country that is deeply affected by what goes on in China. And so too is New Zealand. And my thoughts are that the future of Australia is very much going to be, and in 2022 it's going to be, an attempt really to start to be Australian again, to stop being in the pockets of China and its trade being tied up with China, its politics being influenced by China, and its people being put down in lockdown perhaps because of China. So we're going to see elections in Australia, I feel. You've had your elections, actually, and you've got the Prime Minister, the Liberal Prime Minister, haven't you there, Scott Morrison. I don't know much or anything really about Australian politics, but my feeling was that there's going to be much more of a swing away from Scott Morrison, and I think eventually your other guy, McGowan, isn't it, is going to be sort of kind of supersede Scott Morrison. So I think you've got some elections coming up around in the springtime, and so my feelings are there's going to be a swing away from liberalism and a swing towards your Labour. And so if I'm right with that, that's what forgive me if I get the politics wrong. I'm a POM, but my feelings are that there's going to be a change in your politics there in Australia. A lot more people taking a much more harder scrutiny of politics, a lot more harder politics really happening in Australia, and I think, you know, areas like New South Wales and things are going to have a lot of swings there, particularly with major parties perhaps losing some of the traditional control and leadership that they've had. And I see a shift much more to some of the smaller parties too, and new characters emerging in Australian politics that I think will have a lot of effect. You know, I mean, you've got a lot of strong voices there. That Ricardo Bossy. I mean, I feel there's people like that are coming to the fore. Independent, vocal people who are going to swing a lot of public opinion. And let's face it, through lockdown, people watch YouTube. On YouTube, they tend to watch less of the mainstream media. And so I'm seeing a lot more controversial politics coming to the fore in 2022 and beyond. So it's going to be a time of quite a lot of political upheaval. I think this will cause, you've had some social unrest in Australia, and I think this will cause more kind of social unrest in many ways. We've got lockdowns still ahead. I'll talk about those in a minute. But I think there's going to be quite a tumultuous sort of time in Australian politics, with a lot of people having to rethink, you know, what it means to be an Australian. A rise, I suppose, in a sort of nationalism in Australia, and a fight away from this sort of lay down and give in to China sort of feel. So your Chinese dependency, I think, is going to become one of the major deals ahead. As I predicted in some of my other videos, I see a sort of war happening with Taiwan. I know the tensions have been rising there, but I think that China's going to have, a war with Taiwan. It's going to try to take some of the outer islands. That's what I've said. Now, if I'm right in what I'm saying, Australia's not going to sit on the sidelines with this. You've already got new submarines, and I was talking about the submarine stuff, wasn't I, last year, about this would be sort of a kind of an inflammable point in the South Seas. So is China Seas rather. So I see that there's going to be more of this, and Australia involved. You've got atomic powered submarines coming to you, but I have said this before, I see nuclear subs with nuclear weapons, and I see also Australia building nuclear power stations. I mean, you've got the uranium there, and I see much more of Australia looking to, almost in a desperate attempt, to become more self-sufficient and less dependent on coal exports and iron exports to China. Because I think there's going to be trade barriers coming down. And I feel that Australia, because Australia's already been hit by huge problems with environmental change, fires, and more fires ahead. I mean, there's always going to be fires in Australia, but they've been big. They will continue to be big with flooding. And Australia is being hit perhaps closer and quicker than Europe. Because of the change of the weather patterns in the southern hemisphere. So I think you've got a bumpy year ahead with environmental things in Australia, and possibly even I saw floods that seem to come from the sea. So I don't know if we've got a tsunami of some sort coming to Australia, maybe hitting New Zealand as well, because I see something like in the water there, because I saw big waves rising and flooding something. So this is a sea type thing that I saw, that I feel is going to happen somewhere in the southern hemisphere. I think it's happening to the coastal lines of Australia. So I don't know if that's a tsunami area or not, or whatever it is, but I feel as if there's something down that way that seemed to give me worries about that. Anyway, I've gone off in another direction. Going back to the Taiwan type of problems, I feel Australia will actually be engaged in that. We're going to see big force build-ups. We're not going to see full-out war in the same sort of war we'd have seen like in the wars of the Second World War and with Japan and things like that. We're not going to see that type of warfare, but I think we're going to see some of the islands taken, and I see a really big build-up in 2022 and real serious issues that will affect, for example, the Australian elections in the spring. If I'm right with elections in the spring, that is. Sorry, I'm not informed. I'm picking it up psychically as best I can. So there's going to be a lot of problems, I feel, with trade, compromise over trade. I mean, from Australia's point of view, you trade a lot with China. You become very dependent, particularly on selling your raw resources. I see the shift of trade going much more with India, actually, and some big deals being made between Australia and India as India slowly wakes up. But I feel something really big is going to start to happen in the coming years with India on all levels. And I think Australia is going to benefit from that, and trade deals being done, which means that you'll still be able to sell your iron and things like that. So those are important to the to that. And but I think I think there will be. So I think Australia will join the US, UK, Canada, Japan, India in protecting Taiwan. And that will mean that will be compromises over trade, because you'll feel compromised. It will take some time for Australia to decouple itself from China. But I think it will gradually start to happen. I think the world will start to try to decouple itself from China. And it's going to be a big deal for everybody. And I feel the unfair Chinese trade practices are going to be really called into question, and that Australia will indeed fight for better deals in conjunction with other countries. Because I have spoken before about the English-speaking peoples of the world coming together as one trading union. That would be, places like Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, England, or Europe. Oh, no, sorry, Great Britain. I'm calling us Europe now. And India, because they are strong English-speaking, and America, Canada, and so on. I feel it's like the old British Empire coming back together, but not with Britain in control, with a collective in control. And it's not Commonwealth. It's an English-speaking trade agreements, and I feel that's going to be really important for the future. So there's this Cans UK, isn't there, thing going on already, actually, which that's kind of the seeds of it, but I'm seeing something much bigger than that. I've got some notes in front of me, so I'm just going to see, because many of you have asked me questions, and thanks for that, because you put the questions on the video that I put up before. Very helpful. So I'm going into some of the questiony bits here, so forgive me if I have to stop every now and again to read what I've on the notes. Someone's here had asked about the significant problems with house prices. Now, I think there's going to be inflation is going to become a worldwide problem. We're going to get it in Europe. We're going to get it in the UK. We're going to get it in Canada. We're going to get it in America. And unfortunately, we're going to get it in Australia. And that, I think, is going to make things even worse in the housing market for a while. I think towards the end of 2022 we might see something kind of a bit catastrophic happen in terms of a sort of a readjustment of prices, and possibly the housing market might have a bit of a crash. I feel it's kind of been a meteoric climb where people are trying to put their money into something safe, and it kind of gets a bit out of control, perhaps goes a bit too far. So I think what I think I'm seeing is going up even more, and going at a faster pace than ever, and then kind of popping because it's gone too fast, because like everybody's put their money into it and then suddenly realise that it's not actually as safe as you think, and as money begins to go back into different industries again. So that's the sort of feeling I get with it. So I see a boom and a bust for the housing market in Australia. People are asking here about nuclear power. I've talked about that. I also talked about, didn't I? I mentioned before that I think the desalination of water is going to become, of seawater, is going to become a very big thing in the world. Some countries have already done it. I think Israel, for example, has quite advanced technology on that now. And if Australia does get nuclear power, as I feel it will, I see a big desalination units that are going to sort of help the beginning of the greening of Australia. And in the years to come, not in 2022, sorry, I've had a rotten cold over December, actually. It really lasts about 4 weeks. But anyway, not in 2022 itself, but I think in the future, I think we're going to see some form of new energy. I've spoken a lot about this. Whether it's cold fission or whatever it is, there's something, but I don't think it's quite that. I think it's something we're going to learn. Might even have something to do with something we've discovered about the sun. But it's not from the sun, but it's like something we've learned. And I see something where we can get as almost infinite energy out of nothing. And this is a long way ahead. It's not round the corner, but it's not that far away. But I think this is going to have a massive effect. And particularly on the long-term effect of Australia, because I see the centre of Australia becoming green. I see it being pastures, green pastures. But this is much further ahead. So this is something I think is very optimistic to look forward to, because will Australia? Someone asked there. I can't see it in my notes in front of me, but someone asked, would Australia be a happy country and a nice place to live in the long term? And although I think Australia does have a lot of hard times in the near future, I think Australia will be a very pleasant land in the future, and it will be very prosperous. But its prosperity will not come from trading and flogging stuff to China, which then they flog back to us and take all the profits for themselves. So that's going to be a lot much further ahead. A lot of people asked about the vaccines as well. Australia's had a lot of trouble with people coping with lockdowns and things like that. And big country, lots of space. I mean, it's not like when I went to London last week. I mean, we walked through London, it was literally shoulder to shoulder with people, and I can see how Omicron could spread so quickly, and it is spreading here in the UK. I think Australia, like everywhere, is going to get the same problem with this Omicron spreading. But in a way, and correct me if you think I'm wrong with this, because I know there's a lot of controversy over the vaccines, but I think Omicron is in a way its own vaccine in a funny sort of way, because it's kind of mutated to the point that it's a bit like a cold. Vaccinated people are not particularly affected by it, I believe. Non-vaccinated people aren't as hit as hard as when the COVID-19 first came onto the world. So I think in a way it's given us a milder version of the illness that can perhaps help us to change things. And in combination with the vaccine that's being developed in Australia, I think it's based on the Russian vaccine, the Australian one. I'm not sure about that. I might be wrong. But I get the feeling Australia's going to beat it in 2022, beat the problem. And actually, I get the feeling because you're a smaller population, but with an advanced Western society, I think you're going to probably jump ahead of the world with actually cracking COVID and getting it out of the country completely. So optimistic I feel for Australia with the vaccines and with the herd immunity that comes from the Omicron, and I think somehow I also get a funny feeling with it that it might not affect people in hotter climes as much as it does people in colder climes, a bit like the cold does. But that might be wrong, but that's just something I was picking up with all this as well. I think Australia is going to start to look outward a bit more. It has to with its trade, but I think one of the things I'm seeing it doing is becoming much, much closer to New Zealand, much more free travel between New Zealand and Australia. And I don't think the two countries will ever become one, but I think they will become part of this merger of trade and a commonwealth type of common market, I suppose is the word. I'm seeing that type of thing developing, but not like we got with Europe with all that. I don't see something like that happening, but I just feel, people working together to solve problems. And again, like I say, I see a union between many of the countries of the English-speaking peoples kind of getting together to try to fight collective problems that we have. So I think probably I've covered most everything here. I'm just looking through if there's any other bits that I've missed here from your questions, because I've copied some of the questions into a sort of a file that you can't see, but it's in front of me. Now I think I pretty much covered everything for what I feel is the main stuff. Like I say, the main problems ahead I feel is going to be this whole problem with China, and I think we've all got to start thinking carefully about it. Like I said, it's a Pandora's box. I mean, so much has been coming out of this, and when countries sort of advance very, very fast like this, and they haven't got the democracy in place to deal with that, and we've got, a kind of communist regime in control, but with huge influence on all the countries of the world, I think we're going to see crisis from this, and I think the world's going to have to wake up. And you can find out a lot more about this in my other videos, and I'll be making more into the new year, and I'll probably address things like China as we go into next year and so forth, and see where we go. So anyway, that's my thoughts for Australia. You can get my books in Australia. Here we go with the advertising, guys. Now, here we go. Again, I've been plugging my new one, and I've got to plug it because it is available in Australia. I did see someone put up a silly price. You should be able to get it normal Amazon sort of prices. I published this one on Amazon. It's my book, Be Happy. You've probably, if you've been following the channel, you're sick of tired of hearing this plug. But it's my new book, and I like to see it do well. I go to India, like a lot of Aussies go to India, don't you? And you can, there's amazing people and things to discover over there. I met this wonderful man called Sharavana Baba, and had got into some very deep thoughts, I suppose. So my thoughts about the future of the world are in this book, and how we can be happy in difficult times, and it's fun as well. It's it's sad as well. There's all sorts in there, but yeah, it's a humorous book, so I think you might enjoy it. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Don't forget, if you're new, follow this channel, subscribe to the channel, and we'll be able to keep in touch. And if you really do enjoy what Jane and I have been doing with our live stuff and things like that, we have a live on every Saturday evening. Don't forget to become a patron. It's probably more difficult for people in Australia because of the time differences, but I do try to do things at different times a day so the patrons can join me on Zoom and have chats with me and just see other bits in the background. And by being a patron, you help me and Jane with our work, but also our work to try to get Spiritual Centre together. And we do a lot of charitable work as well. And just talking of that, I gave a little bit of money to Afghanistan's starving recently. Why don't we all do that? If you're watching this channel as a Christmas gift, let's all just, not through me or anything like that, let's just all give a bit to those starving kids in the world, because it's a difficult time. And so if you've been thinking about it, do it. Okay, see you all soon. Bye for now. Thanks for joining me.